So my name is Kevin, and I'll be moderating the session. And we have our two books here. They're both in English. So the session, as you can see, is Writing Macau in English, and it's navigating through language and cultural diversity. So I'm going to be introducing the three by asking them a question. So I'm going to start with Maggie, and I'm going to start with her book here, which is the one in yellow. They actually have two books, a yellow and a green book. And Maggie is actually a local from Macau. So she's actually also at the University of Macau now, but they've been writing together about Macau. And I just want to ask her the first question: how has your perception changed of Macau from before you started the book and now that you've written two books already?
Thank you, Kevin. I was born and grew up in Macau, and I have to say that when I was a little girl, I walked past a lot of landmarks in Macau, but not really understand or know what is the story behind them. I always know that they're there, and they are like very beautiful architecture. But having done the book, it really deepened my understanding of the rich history of Macau, and also make me understand a lot better than when I study world history and the significance of the role of Macau play in the past, that how the globalization has started, and it's really an interesting feeling as a person who lived here for all my life.
Thank you, Maggie. I'm also going to introduce Christopher, and if you don't know, they're a husband and wife couple who's written the book together. So I want to, Christopher has a financial background from Hong Kong, and then he came to be with Maggie, and they started getting very passionately involved with Macau. Christopher, can you tell me a little bit about why you got interested in writing about Macau and some of your experiences writing about Macau?
Sure. Thank you, and this is great. Thank you, everyone, for having us. Macau just had a very interesting, just as a visitor, was just always very fascinating. You see this idea of Western, Eastern architecture and thinking and ideology kind of merge together. And what was quite both fascinating but also simultaneously annoying was that they always described Macau as a city where East meets West. Everything was East meets West. And while that's not wrong, it just seemed to overshadow the uniqueness of Macau. So our project was a COVID project, and we took advantage of the fact that it was easy to visit places. And when we saw these museums and we saw these wonderful churches, the information was quite limited. I mean, there was always this idea of this is what happened, this is what was built, but we never saw a complete story. So we thought, this would be interesting if we could understand what really happened in front of these wonderful buildings. So we take something like Casa Garden, for example. We think about the decisions that were made in this room. We think about the people that were here, and suddenly history becomes much more tangible. And it was one of those projects that was just very, COVID was not a great time for a lot of people, but being able to put the story together and make history but more tangible was something I think very few people had the opportunity to do. So we were just very lucky that we could do it and do it together in a kind of uncertain time.
Thank you, Christopher. And also we have Andrew Pearson, and his book is A Dead Ship Syndicate. And he has an interesting background as well. He's has an AI company, and he also has a screenwriting past. So Andrew, can you tell us a little bit about some of those past experiences and how they found their way into the book, and tell us a little bit about the book as well?
Sure. So thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for coming too. Basically, I lived in LA for about 20 years, and I was working in the film industry, and I was optioning books and adapting the books into screenplays, trying to get them made. Got close many times, but never quite got it over the line. So when you option books, you have to spend money to pay the author some money, and then you have usually 3 years in which to get the movie made. If you don't get it made at that point, you then lose everything. So what I was offered a job here by my twin brother about 10 years ago. And what I knew about Macau was very small. I did know that it was Portuguese, but I also knew there was a little irreverence there. I obviously knew about the film industry. And when I came here, it was fascinating because, I learned about Broken Tooth and his attempt, or his movie-making career, and how he had shut down the bridge, one of the bridges, and then you know, some of the other colorful stories about that. And I thought, why don't we put this into a story in which an American/British expat comes to Macau, gets involved with a casino owner, junket operator, who wants to have a book written about his life, not for the reasons that we think. And then it just became a story kind of about my frustration of being a screenwriter and trying to make it in the screenwriting world. And then, you know, kind of also about a character who does, by the end of the book, you know, survives, finds out who's trying to kill him, and basically ends up writing a book, and the book becomes a film. So, you know, I basically created my own dream, I guess, in the book. So.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll go back and forth between the two books. So we're going to go back to Christopher and Maggie. And maybe can you tell the audience a little bit about how you organized the book, and also how you went about the research part, and particularly how you navigated the language of Portuguese, Chinese, and then writing it in English?
Right. So I guess our process of working on both the Green Book and the Yellow Book, first, I guess we should talk about our background. So my background was kind of a decade in finance, and Maggie's a scientist. So we knew that when we put this story together, it was very important that we utilize our skill sets. I mean, what makes us different from, I think, other writers? So when we began the project, the first thing we did was, I mean, for the Green Book, we found a landmark, and we said, okay, what is the kind of consensus, or what does everyone know about this building, or what does everyone know about this particular kind of artifact? And then we kind of went deeper and asked ourselves, well, what else happened in that time period? What else kind of took, you know, what else kind of was unfolding among the Portuguese community, among the Chinese community, among the other Europeans that were here? Once we had these facts, or kind of these anecdotes, Maggie, kind of being a scientist, was able to, I guess, filter them and say, okay, what can we use as a kind of valid point, or what can we work with? And suddenly what ends up happening is, again, we're taking a very different approach. I mean, we're taking a kind of journalistic and a very scientific way of telling the same story, but kind of deconstructing it and putting it back together. And we just essentially did this with every landmark and did it in chronological order. So we started with Camões just up the road. We talk about St. Anthony's around the way. And we begin to see what history unfolds in the 400, 500 years of kind of that merged culture here in Macau. I'll let you add if you...
And I think also we do it kind of like a very academic research way as well, because we have the good resources of the databases, like academic databases from the university. So we really look into the historical published journals, and then we try to collect the information and the facts. And then also during the process, when Christopher first he will drafts in English, and then we also have translated the book into Chinese. And so I also cross-reference with the Chinese literature that's available, and then we'll fact-check between the languages, like English sources and Chinese sources, so that we can have like a balanced view, or a point of view, and different aspects from the two languages that we were able to resource. So I think that is also a point that make the book quite interesting, in the sense that it take into the consideration of the more, we try to incorporate different aspects.
Try to make it as inclusive as we could, just to ensure that we had kind of everyone's voice at the table when we put it down on paper.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Maggie. And we'll come back to Andrew Pearson with his book, The Dead Ship Syndicate. And he has a background with AI, and I'm just kind of curious how your knowledge of AI feeds its way into the book, and do you also get information from newspaper clippings or online?
Sure.
How do you get them into the book, and how do you draw from them?
So yeah, I have a software consulting company that's been working in analytics for 10 plus years. The reason why I came out to Macau was because my twin brother asked me to come to Macau to basically run the Asian operation, and we were working with Venetian, basically implementing personalization marketing campaigns. So every time someone spends money within the casino, Venetian knows, and then they know how much to market to them and what value they are to the casino. So AI is fascinating, and it's become very interesting, and it's something that I'm doing a lot with right now. But once again, it's very much on the personalization side of things. In the book, I remember reading an article about facial recognition technology that was being used by the casinos. And what they were doing was they were in the high roller rooms and they didn't know who the people were, but they were associating the face with the play of the gambler. So if you play Baccarat, if you play Banker, that's 1.5% for the casino. If you play ties, that's 10% to the casino. So the casinos were looking at and saying, the guy who plays the tie is a much more valuable player to us, so we're going to market to him much more than we will to the regular players. Macau DCIJ discovered that, and they said, you got to stop doing that. You can only do that with, you can only use facial recognition for security purposes. And then one of my characters has he's a junket operator who's worried about basically being imprisoned. So he uses the facial recognition technology to spot the high rollers in his room who are actually the money launderers. So there's a scene where he does get arrested, and they do put him on trial, and that's one of the one of the big plot points throughout the piece. But in the book, the American expat, that's one of the jobs that he does for the junket operator. So that was something, and then a couple of small ones I noticed was quite funny. There was a BBC article I saw about 4 hitmen in China who tried to outsource their hit. So basically, one guy was offered, I don't know, 200,000, and then he went to someone else and said, "Oh, will you do it for 100,000?" He went to someone lower. The 4th guy basically got so annoyed by the amount, the small amount that he was offered, that he went to the police. And it's an article on BBC.com if you want to see that. And then there was also an interesting article about Dragon Coin, which I don't know if any of you have heard of, but it was basically an ICO a few years ago that the junkets were pushing, and they were hoping that the Chinese gamblers would be able to come into Macau, they would be able to buy the coin, use it in the junket rooms, and then the money was actually supposed to be used also to purchase it was to build a floating casino with the Norwegian government, was supposed to be one of the investors, and I just thought, this is so ridiculous that I need to satirize it and put it in a book. So the book is a thriller, but I option a lot of books by, not by Elmore Leonard, but that have been compared to Elmore Leonard. So if you know who Elmore Leonard is, very, very well-known American author, very irreverent, very funny, so very much fits within that vein. So it is a thriller, but there's a lot of comedy and a lot of satire and a lot of kind of quirky irreverence in it. So I just read all these articles, I just saw them in the paper, and I was just like, let me tie this into a story about 2 brothers that one betrays the other, and Macau becomes kind of like, I hope, like LA was in the Raymond Chandler novels, or like LA was in the movie Chinatown, or so we'll see if it did, but it's such a fascinating place. So
let's go back to Christopher and Maggie. So I have a question about their 2 books. You can see there's a green book. They refer to one as the green book and the yellow book, and the yellow book has a little bit of a different angle to it with a certain character. And could you tell us a little bit about how the second book differentiates from the first and what the theme is of it? And
Sure. So our yellow book is about Camilo Peçanha, a very famous Portuguese poet who lived essentially his life here in Macau. The backstory of Peçanha, or at least our Peçanha project, is quite interesting. When we wrote the Green Book, it was really focused on landmarks and what story the landmark can tell. And we were having dinner with a friend of ours, and he said, "Are you planning to write about Camilo Peçanha?" To which we said, "Who? We have no idea who this guy is." So of course we were ostracized afterwards, and we did a bit of research, and what we found was it was such a very unique character, and it's very unique. And it fell into the same equation of what does consensus say? Like, what do people say Peçanha is? And how do we think he's different from what kind of everyone else would discuss about? So in the end, we decided to add a chapter about Peçanha in the Green Book, and we tied him to the cemetery, St. Michael's, where he's currently buried. Now, because it's about a person and not a landmark, we didn't really count it as a story. So even though it says 22 stories on the Green Book, it's actually a lie. There's actually 23 stories. But in the spirit of Macau, things are misdated and misread anyway. But when we finished the Green Book, we had a discussion, and there was so much research, and there was just so much of a fascinating story about Peçanha that we made him into this yellow book. And it follows kind of the same equation. It's how can we tell a story about Macau, but through the purview of someone else? So for those that are not aware, Camilo Pestana lived in Macau between 1895 to 1926. And this is a very kind of formidable period in Macau's history. In the 1890s, we had the Pink Corridor in Africa. In the 1900s, World War I, you had the fall of the Portuguese Republic, the fall of the Qing dynasty. And Pestana was here when all these events took place. And so even though Pestana's name is on the book, it's really not about Pestana. It's really about his time here in Macau and what he saw and how we're able to kind of tell the Macau story through his eyes. It's more novelty, but it follows kind of a similar equation. Very simple, straightforward uniqueness in a voice that we can give a character.
I want to add on to these two books are quite similar in a way that this green one is seeing the Macau through the eyes of the landmarks, and this one is more like seeing Macau through the eyes of the poet who lived in Macau, Camilo Pestana. So the two books, although one is more talking about the landmarks, one is more talking about a historical figure in Macau, but as Christopher said, the equation is quite similar to generation of the book.
I guess we'll give an example. So if we kind of talk to a novice of who Camilo Pestana is, the first thing that comes up was that he wrote very kind of depressing poetry. He enjoyed opium. He had a concubine, and then he married the concubine's daughter, so then married the stepdaughter. Right, so all of a sudden, it's not that great of a story. But when you take one step back and realize that he was also a judge, a teacher, he was head of the land registry, how Macau evolved in front of him. The most famous, I think, uniqueness of him was that there's a very famous Kalawan pirate attack that happened in 1910. And the Kalawan village was destroyed, and it became this question of who had jurisdiction of Taipa at the time. The prisoners were taken to the St. Barracks, the St. Francis Barracks, and they were tried, and obviously they were punished. And who was a judge on the war council? It's Pestana. And he was there looking at this history unfold as a judge and as a member of the kind of Portuguese community here in Macau. But we always disassociate him with that poetry at that moment. But as a historical figure, he's very important. And we thought that there's no one better to tell Macau's story than someone who actually shaped Macau.
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. I'm going to move to a publishing question. So I'm going to we're going to ask about. We have one book is published in Macau, and the other is published in the United States. So this one is about publishing in the United States, and what was your experience with it? How did they react to the setting, and also how does Macau play out for not only your book but also just your screenwriting experience as well? How is Macau as a place to film possibly, and also for your book as for writing?
Sure. So after 15 years of, and I worked on movies, so I was working in the film industry. I did get paid for a few scripts, and I got hired to write a couple of scripts as well. So, but it was, the reality is in the film industry, if you don't get a film made, then you're a nobody. You're not gonna get into the WGA, and you're not really gonna be working and making the nice money that the writers do. So, but adapting a book is an easier thing, I think, than writing something from scratch. I mean, really writing something from scratch is not an easy thing to do. The fact that I had written all these screenplays, I think, helped me because I was breaking down the plot of each of these things, or each of these books, and then figuring out all these, how does the character fit, how does the dialogue fit. So that was actually, so when it came to actually writing it, it wasn't that hard, but I knew it needed to be edited properly. And one of the authors that I had optioned, a guy named Robert Everts, I found out that he was a teacher at UCLA. He teaches novel writing. So I connected with him and I said, hey, I didn't want to take his course. He has a business on the side where he'll basically look at novels. So, he put me at the front of the list. He took a few weeks to read it. And then, that moment when you get the notes back and someone actually thinks your book is actually something worthy, because he's reading 200, 300 pages of the novel and then giving you, and it was actually more than that at that point. He said I was a little indulgent in places, which I think, as a first-time writer, that's going to happen. And then it was kind of really good because I then kind of joined a lot of communities in online, like writing communities. Critique Circle was a really good one. You put up each chapter, and then you review other people's chapters, and they review yours. And then you kind of, if you're any good, you get a community that's kind of following you, and they understand your story. And then I did also spend a lot of time looking at publishers and looking at agents. I went to the agents right before the publishers, and I found I didn't get any responses. And so I was like, why not just go directly to the publishers? And then when I did that, it was honestly like the fifth publisher who read the first, because you put up about 30 or 40 pages, and then they ask you for the whole book, and then literally, she asked me for the book. It was Brother Mockingbird. And a few days later, it was Saturday, I get an email, because she's in America, so I get an email first thing in the morning, and at 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning, you're like, oh, what is this? And then she's like, oh, I want to do it, so. And then I got a second publisher a week or so later, but they were like, oh, your chapters are a little small here. I think it's because of you were a screenwriter and you're trying to write your novel for the first time. And she was like, I think it's really good. I'm interested, but I want you to make some changes. And having an experience in the film business where there's a lot of producers who will say, oh yeah, I love your script, but you need to do all these free you need to do all these free changes. You do them, and then, the thing withers on the vine. So I was like, no, someone wants to do it. I'm getting old. It's time to get this thing published. And it's been a great experience. She understands the business on the level that I just don't understand. So she's a small house, but and the last point, she actually had, one of the reasons why I wanted to go with her, she had just done a book that was it was a mystery set in Japan. So I thought, oh, she understands the Asian market, and yeah, so it's been a good experience. And it was weird how it was the complete opposite of the film business. And I was banging my head against the wall, and it was basically publisher number 5 that said, let's do this, so.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. So Christopher and Maggie, it's also going to be a publishing question as well, and you have, your books are in English. I think you also have a Chinese one as well, but maybe you can tell us about how you found the English publisher, what was your experience with them, how did they react to it, do you think they might be interested in other works of other writers as well as from yourself as well?
Sure, thank you, Kevin. Actually, our publisher, he's also here today. He's very kind. So our experience is very nice. So like when Christopher and I have this idea that we want to write a book about the landmarks of Macau, a lot of people actually told us that why? There's so many out there already. You are just, do you want to write just for fun, or what is the purpose? But Christopher find it very therapeutic to write about these landmarks during the period of the COVID lockdown. And so both of us was able to play tourists ourselves. So we visit this landmark, so we enjoyed it a lot. And so I asked around my colleagues and asked them who has book published in Macau before, and then they recommend our publisher. And then they said, this is a very small publisher. It was a local Macau publisher. It's very young. The owner, the entrepreneur, very passionate about publishing books and works that's interesting for Macau and also for Macau's artists, Macau's writers. So they were really helpful and eager to work with new people like us. So we go and visit them, and then we meet a few times and talk about ideas. And since then, we have been very good at collaborating with them.
I think we were very lucky because when we put this project together, Maggie's an educator, and it was important that for me, if I was looking to buy a book of Macau, this is the kind of book that I would buy. I want it to be, every time I come to Macau, it's such very rich in knowledge. And so it was quite fortunate that our publisher really puts education kind of in the forefront of its priorities. So they work with schools, they work with educators, and so they were very instrumental in making sure that our book kind of fit. So our priorities were aligned, so it was always very smooth from the very beginning, and I guess we were very lucky. So once we put the first book out and they liked it, and in the Chinese they liked it, and when it came to the yellow book, they liked it too, which is quite interesting because it is about a Portuguese man living in Macau. It doesn't really fit the mantra of a local publisher, but they saw educational value behind it. They thought that it'd be good for ESL purposes, for just general education classes about Macau. And so it was almost very smooth. So we were very lucky in that regard.
One thing to add too, I think, timing is also very important, and I think there's been a very strong movement in Asian stories. There is obviously, with a lot of stuff that's happened on Netflix with the Squid Game, let's say. Korean cinema became very, very big. Korean music obviously became huge. The Singapore movie, Crazy Rich Asians, there's TV shows in America. So I think that all helped in myself getting an American publisher in an odd way, right? So I do think it's a very strong market going forward.
Actually, I want to add on to, a lot of people also ask us, do you want to make your book available on Amazon? And Christopher and I have a valuable discussion about it. And then we feel that these books maybe is more like for tourists, I guess, and so people who come here, they want to see these books, but then if we put it on Amazon, maybe may not be do the tricks, and so we feel that with our publisher, we more like a local market, but for something like maybe Andrew is writing this is like a creative work novel, maybe the American publisher in Amazon's, this kind of global platform may be more appropriate for this kind of work than.
No, I think Andrew makes a really good point. There is a lot of interest in Asian stories. There's a lot of interest to be here. We were closed for a better part of 3 years, and a lot of just action is happening on the ground. So anytime that's done in a literary sense, or I think any good story, particularly since it's very authentic, you're going to naturally find an audience in this part of the world.
And one thing I did when I was writing it is there's 3 main characters in it. There's a Chinese junket operator. I made the detective. I thought about the detective should be Chinese, and he started as Chinese, but then I thought, no, let's get a triumvirate here of Portuguese, Chinese, and American/Brit. So we had a nice cultural, trilogy going here with 3 different characters, and basically the detective's after the Chinese junket operator, but he's also after the American as well. So that was kind of fun to play with all of the different cultural items, and because obviously the Portuguese see things in a very different ways that the Chinese do here, and the Americans and the British and the foreign expats also see things in a very different way as well. So it was kind of wonderful taking that. We always talk about a fish out of water story. So you dump kind of one character into a completely new and foreign environment, and that was kind of a lot of the humor comes from there, and obviously a lot of the tension comes from the life-threatening things that happen. But anyway, yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I think I didn't live in America, but I moved to America. I am American, but I moved to America at 16, and it was very interesting to see that country through the eyes of kind of a foreigner, but being an American too. And I think that helped me in this way too, because I think a lot of times you might get, if you live in the environment, there are things that happen that you don't really see on a level that an outsider would see. So it was an interesting way to look at the society and kind of poke fun at it, because there are a lot of irreverent, silly things that happen here that I think the world would chuckle at, and even I think a lot of Macau people chuckle at too. So yeah.
I'm gonna ask you another question that's kind of similar to that, but his book is about Macau, so there's maybe things that maybe even people that live in Macau might not know about. And what are some of those things that they might read about in the book about Macau that they might not know?
Well, there is there is the short history about Broken Tooth, and how he tried to make a movie, and then he tried to blow up the Undersecretary of Security, and I have the Americans say, oh, at least he was aiming high. So he talks about some of the history here that is a little dramatic. Then what would be the other things? Obviously the ICO, the casinos. He goes into the casinos. You learn a little bit of history there. But I tried to I tried to put him in a situation where he's associating with Macau locals, learning about the quirky ways, learning about the culture and the interesting history here. Because I do put, there is a problem gambler who dies, and so we go to Ama Temple. So we see the history of there. There are other scenes where, let's see, where else does he go? He doesn't go to the ruins, but I do put certain scenes in certain sections, and one of the characters is not very religious, and he kind of pokes fun at the religious aspect of cultures more than just Macau. But yeah, so and then actually there's a Lionsgate film over in Henshin Island, so we reference that, and we reference a lot of film aspect of the city as well. Like, we don't really quite realize that there's a Lionsgate Film is the company that did Moonlight, or the movie about the vampires, the very famous vampire ones, and then so you've got basically this $400 million amusement park that was all based on movies like Prison Break and the Hunger Games and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, I very much wanted to make it a commentary about the film world as well, and where we are, what are we doing when we make some of these movies about the Avengers and stuff like that. I understand they're entertainment, but yeah, so that's kind of a little some of the details, but.
And I have a similar question for Christopher and Maggie. And since you have published both of these books and you've had maybe some feedback from different people, what are some things that people might be giving you feedback about when they read your stories?
I think well, it's interesting because we already had written about Camila Pisania before we published the Yellow Book, and we had asked around for kind of experts on the idea, given it is a kind of a national hero to so many people here. And it wasn't really much of a pushback, it was more of a warning, don't make us look bad. So we wanted to make sure that we had a balanced view. But I think what was interesting was, when we looked at a guy who did opium and married his concubine, there was actually a love story in it. It was about his relationship with all his friends here. He was in the social circles of very prominent people. And when we kind of brought these stories to light, it wasn't pushback, but what I found fascinating was that it connected other stories. So someone would mention like, oh, that's interesting because I heard this component of this life, or I had heard this component of this other person. And I think we had kind of maybe had the embers of a flame, but when people began to share their personal stories with Pisana or with the landmarks, we got a much bigger, I think, fire as a result, because everyone has a story about Macau. So it's been quite positive. I think there has been interest to translate the book into Chinese and Portuguese, which is something we're working on. But until we do, it's been quite, I think, it's quite good. I think we were quite worried that we didn't do a great job, but so far so good. I'll let you add.
I think the general feedback is that you guys are very brave. They said Camilo Pisana is very famous, especially in Macau, Portuguese community, because his poetry is considered to be if not the best, but one of the best, like in the period of the symbolism, and then so most of the people who know that we are writing about him would say, you're very brave, and I'm very interested to read what you're going to write about. And so, yeah, I'm excited.
I'm not sure how we are with time, but it's still okay. Okay, good. So 5 minutes. So I think what we're going to do is maybe a little bit of a summary conclusion part. So I'll just let each person maybe give some kind of final words of what they choose to say. So we're going to start with Andrew. Is there anything you want to say about your book or about anything at all?
Yeah. So the interesting part of the book is it is about twins. And one of the things, I have a twin, And when I was in LA, I was trying to find a book about twins that would make interesting movies. And I did a study, or when I was writing this, it seemed like there were 10 twins that had killed each other, or killed other twins, which is a very, very low rate of killing between, compared to siblings and other family members. And I think the writing about that and taking a twin that does actually betray his twin was a very powerful, therapeutic thing. I think one of the questions I had from Macau when I answered some questions for them, they said, "What was the reason you wrote the book?" And I said, basically, it was I would have to have therapy or write a book, and I didn't have money for therapy, so it was basically write the book. And the book was, anyone who wants to write. I would highly recommend it. It is a wonderful way to figure out what's going on in your life, what's going on in other people's lives, and And the funny thing when I was writing it through the critique circle was, like, usually if you've written a really good sentence, but you're like, I'm not sure, But the beauty of having feedback instantly or within a week is, I was able to people were like, yeah, that was great, So, the whole thing about writing a script is you have to shine a diamond, basically, and make every scene brilliant, and that's the only way you're going to ever be lucky enough to get a film made. So to have people kind of looking at it and saying, yes, this is good, this is good, this is good, or this doesn't work, you can kind of feel where the emotion is dying, and so. But for me, it was the proudest thing I've ever done, to be quite frank, and I'm very happy that it's made. I've turned it into a screenplay, so I am trying to still get it made. but yeah, so anyway, just happy, and obviously very happy to be here talking about it, because I think this is what every writer loves to do, besides write.
I think from our experience, the art of writing is rewriting. And especially when you do it with kind of a co-pilot, how do we tell the story? How do we kind of purvey the message in a way that we think is pure and authentic? For me, I think with the Pearson book, what was quite interesting was, here's a Portuguese guy living in Macau, really just chilling out. How relatable it was, and how there were times where you saw his struggles and you were able to kind of reflect on those and see what he was going on at kind of an uncertain time in the world history and how we were during COVID. And it was very humbling. I think Andrew mentions it. It's a very humbling experience to write a book. And it's also a reminder, at least with I think doing this, with my character, with Pearson, it was a reminder that nothing is guaranteed. Here's a guy who showed up as a judge, a teacher and a judge. He lived in a big house in Praia Grande. He was on the money in Macau. But he lived also, his life was also a struggle. And if someone can find beauty in such kind of a sad world, I mean, it seems that almost anyone can. And I think, for me, echoing what Andrew said, it is very therapeutic to put this out. Therapy is very expensive. And
I think you said you were like living with him as a ghost for a while the other day. Yeah.
We had, this is as a side anecdote, when we put this together, I really felt that Pearson's ghost was living with us for a year. And so when we wrote this down, we would have a story and we would talk about it. Maggie and I would talk about the story, and there are those moments of, it just feels wrong. Like there's like a voice that says, that's not how it happened. And we would have to kind of rewrite it. And it almost like, it was like a third vote between the two of us. Like he was a tie-breaking vote. And we, I think, told a story that was very authentic. And I think hopefully it portrays his life in the beautiful manner that maybe other people don't see. And we hope that people see.
For me, because I am from Macau and I feel very attached to Macau as well. So any creative work or story that was written based in Macau, I got very excited. So I'm really looking forward to see Andrew's book being turned into a movie, and I really want to watch it. And then also, if any of the stories about Macau, that like a story written based in Macau, use the scenic feature of Macau in a movie. Every time when I watch a movie, when I see the landmark of Macau, I got really excited and proud, and then I wish that would come true as well.
Well, it's funny because I have friends who are like, "Oh yeah, I know Macau. It was in the Bond film, wasn't it?" I'm like, "No, not the one with the what was it, the lizard, big lizard thing." Like the 2 movies ago, they supposedly come to Macau, but they're driving on, it's on the water, and it's just, they didn't, it was a soundstage in London, obviously.
The last one I saw was Johnny English, when a coolie pulls him in a rickshaw and drops him off at the Grand Lisbon.
At least they did, yeah, at least they did, you know. But you can go to YouTube, and actually, if you pull up Macau Casino, you will see Broken Tooth's movie, actually, from way back then. So, anyway, do you have a question?
Yeah, so I guess we'll move to the question and answer time. So first, before we do, let's just give a big round of applause. There's some really great talk. And so we'll open up the floor to questions. So if anybody would like to give a question for them.
Can I start with the question then? To get the ball. So for those that may or may not know, Kevin's also a published writer. He's written both about in Macau and in Korea. And we mentioned about the audience here a bit. I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are about how writing a book in Macau and Korea and the difference in reception from your different ideas, and how you're able to tailor your message for that audience, but at the same time keep it broader for a general public.
That's true. I have 2 books. So I have one called No Couches in Korea and one called Moon Over Macau. They're both in the Portuguese bookstore. I guess as far as I have had different people, I was talking to Barbara right here who read the book, and different people have come up to me and have read Moon Over Macau, and they've usually have very positive things to say. I've had a lot of positive reception from that. No Couches in Korea was my experience in Korea, and it's a completely different audience. It's mostly expats in Korea. And they kind of talk about sharing that same experience that I had when I was there. So I had kind of 2 very different audiences, but both quite interesting to get feedback from as well. Yeah, thanks for the question. And so we'll open up the questions to you guys as well. Anything you'd like to ask?
Can I ask? Oh.
Hello, I'm Marisa Gaspar, and I would like to ask a question to Christoph and Maggie about, well, I didn't read the books, and I'm an anthropologist working about Macau for many years, and in a way, I think we probably, the way that we write probably must be similar in terms of the ethnographic description, right? So my question is, how much do you feel this is a novel, or if this is a kind of ethnographic research? How do you put it? If it's a mix that you try to bring these both academic writings and styles, and even different kind of research that we do based on the final product, if you try to bring both together in order not just to be a novel or not just to be an academic thing, or if you have that in mind during your process of writing. And the other question will be that, well, me being a Portuguese and coming to Macau for research and going back home and writing back from home about this, sometimes I just need to rely very much on my memory and my records and my fieldwork notes and my photographies. How was it to do it in the same place? I mean, you can check all your sources and to go out again one and another time to check out that information, or to see the landscape again, or something is missing. How was it through it helped, or it actually in the end it was kind of, oh, I should have see again because I need to rewrite all this all over again. Thank you.
So when we put this book together, I essentially built on my background. Background in finance is where you take kind of like, there's a lot of facts and you try to squeeze it into very simple, like into a simple message. We followed kind of a very basic equation. Each chapter in the Green Book is about 800 to 1,000 words, which is about a newspaper article, and we chose it to be very succinct. With the Pisana book, we made it more novel-y, but took a lot of those elements of keeping it also very thin. So rather than being 800 to 1,000, we go to 1,000 to 2,000 per chapter. I guess the reason why it's yellow is I'm originally from New York, and so the yellow is actually a play on the Broadway playbill. So when you go see a show and you kind of, before the show starts, you're given a yellow book and it tells you the cast of characters, it explains the location, and that was kind of how we put it together. So there is a novel feel to this, but it follows kind of the very simple equation of condensing information, really focusing on what's important, what's our key message, and how do we, I guess, convey that to the reader. On the second point, it's actually a very fun point because you were mentioning how do we write something here in Macau? And I guess to add it, we wrote this during COVID. So, I remember when we wrote the Green Book together, how we would look at, say, the facade of the ruins of St. Paul and discuss about the angels that are engraved in the stone or the palm trees. And there are these days where we would highlight a point, and Maggie and I would say, I don't remember that. And we get kind of frustrated and go, okay, I guess we're going to the landmark. And so we would go. And so we would go back to the church or we'd go back to the building and try to re-examine what we forgot. And it's interesting, like we would go the first time and see something, we would jot it down. But after doing the research and after going through our notes, when you go back a second time, you do see that landmark in a new light. And there's a new kind of connection to it. This is going to sound a bit morbid. When Pisana is buried in the St. Michael's Church in St. Lazarus District. And when you go through all his friends and you go through all the people that he was associated with, as you walk to his tombstone, you begin to see his friends' names also on the tombstone. And you go, oh, he's here also. So Pisana is kind of with the same crew that he was with when he was alive and now in death.
Well, I think that is a really good question. That when you go to the landmark the first time, you kind of miss a lot of details, and then especially I remember I go to the chapel in the Saint Joseph, and then when we go back home, and then we found a paper that was talking about the architecture of Saint Joseph, and then at that time I was like, oh, I now realize why it was in this shape, and I think it's a benefit that we can go and see the landmarks again during the research. Yeah, so
this is not a great analogy, but sometimes when you watch a Pixar movie, they have a lot of these Easter eggs throughout, and then you go back and you rewatch the movie and you see them. It's almost similar to that because we do miss these things. We do miss kind of the small details in the very beginning because you're trying to find a very big picture story with it. But I think we took advantage of the fact that there weren't that many tourists and really got to absorb the deep history that's here in Macau.
Actually, I want to ask Andrew a question that Kevin has asked me from the beginning. Writing this book based in Macau, does it change your perspective afterwards about Macau?
Yeah, to a certain extent, I kind of knew what I was getting into here. And one of the problems when I moved out here was the company that I was working for. I was learning a whole new industry. As a writer before, I was doing some marketing, so I was thrown into a situation where I had to learn all about the software consulting industry. So at the very beginning, Macau would have been, I was living over at One Central, so I actually was born in, I was raised in Singapore, so I had an Asian, so I was actually raised in Southeast Asia. So it's not like I was a foreigner coming to a strange place. It was like I was not a local, but someone who was raised here, so kind of coming back in many ways. But when I first came out here, it was I was pulling my hair out because I was trying to understand the industry, but also selling hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of software to customers who were very unhappy with the services that we were getting. So I had a very negative view of not really my life, but the situation I was in. So my sense of Macau at that time was probably a little bit negative. However, I do remember thinking, this is a fantastic industry, so if I can just keep going here and get through the madness of this, that this would be a great place to live and a great place to, and a great job. And actually, I stopped working with my twin and created my own company. And then during COVID, wrote the book. And it's obviously a fascinating place. It's the only place in the world that's got, you step on a bus and it's English, Portuguese, Cantonese, and Mandarin sometimes. You look at you look at the taxis here, and they have that livre, I think it's livre, right? And then available kind of a thing, and all the architecture is Portuguese, but all the lettering of the signs are pretty much in Chinese. So, and as a writer, I think you're always looking for unique stories and unique places to set stories, and but I think I was able to put a very emotional story between two characters and two brothers and two twins into a really weird place and a really weird time too. I mean, let's be frank, these are not normal times right now. So if we look back 5 or 10 years, a lot has happened in this world. Obviously today, we've got some crazy things going on. So I kind of wanted to capture a time and a place, and I think I did a pretty good job. So yeah, thanks for the question though.
Can I ask a question? So
we're done.
So what's the follow-up to Dead Ship Syndicate? Like, what's next?
So this ends with him on the set of a movie, which is based on the book. Cash is King is the name of the book, and the sequel is coming. I'm writing right now. It's either called Quid Pro Crypto or maybe a crypto sum game, and it's basically about a guy who gets involved with another crypto. And I noticed while I was reading this, there's a lot of crypto is kind of it got hit at this time last year, I think in the summertime. And I just looked at these characters who, like a Do Kwon character, or even the FTX guy who's now in a lot of trouble. And these guys were living an insane life. So that book starts on the set of Cash is King, but the director gets kidnapped because he's involved with a match-fixing scandal. So but this one's actually not all set in Macau. It'll be set in Malaysia and Singapore, which are the match-fixing capitals of the world. So it's kind of about crypto funding for a movie, the crypto coin going basically crashing, and all of these billionaires who are actually running the world, I think, into the ground in many ways. And so it's one of the interesting things, this is my last point, one of the interesting things about someone who reviewed the book was like, this fits right within those books or the TV shows like Secession or Triangle of Sadness. The current movement seems to be, let's do these books or movies about really rich people doing really bad things to innocent people in many ways. So I think it fits within that, and then the follow-up will follow up that story. So
Looking forward to it.
It's been fun as hell to write, so I have to say, but anyway.